Federal agencies are on a constant modernization journey. Working with integrators steeped in managed service program delivery can help agencies make headway with their most pressing IT infrastructure, application, and security needs. I'm Wyatt Cash with Scoop News Group, and here to talk about that is Lexy Guenther, Chief Technology Officer at Leidos. Lexy, thank you so much for joining us. And let me start by asking, how can switching to or adopting an as-a-service model for enterprise IT or security operations centers present a faster or more effective way of delivering on an agency's mission?
Yes, when we're talking about an as-a-service model, we're really focused on centralizing service delivery, which has multiple benefits, to include one, aggregating the data, which creates more effective, faster, and easier search and analytics capabilities. Two, service providers can provide more consistent user experience. And three, cost efficiencies, which obviously can be realized when you're centralizing operations into a single team's responsibility instead of duplicating those functions in multiple organizations throughout your agency. And I just want to double click on that last item for a minute, because there's an opportunity cost there that I want to make sure we talk about. So if you have multiple contracts and multiple teams and multiple providers of that service in different areas of an agency, you're paying the administrative costs to manage multiple iterations of the same type of service. So by moving to an as-a-service model, you not only consolidate the administrative management, but you free up the government personnel to focus on more of the mission-focused problems and how to focus on solving those problems instead of being distracted. Now, the other thing I'll say is the minute we use the term as a service, I always make sure we kind of are talking about the same things, because most agencies, and even down to the person level, it can mean a lot of things to different people when you're talking about outsourcing or managing services in a variety of ways. We used to have clear lines between contractor owned and operated or government owned and operated. But the lines of ownership and oversight and operations, there's a variety of models now that really blend that. And as a service model is kind of the newest iteration of where we're really seeing that. So you have to ask yourselves a few questions to kind of cut through and get to the bottom of, does this make sense for me? Things like, what do I want to own? What's the best use of my staff's time and attention, right? It goes back to that mission focus. Is there a way to quantify, like binding with a statement of work and SLAs, the service in question, whether that's IT, whether it's cyber or something else? And if I want to do all that and I have that statement of work and SLAs, well, then why wouldn't I offload my team so they can work those mission critical issues? And some people will say they have concerns over multi-tenancy or blended data repositories and sensitive data mixing, wasted sunk costs based on the technology they already bought, fears that they don't know how to procure an as-a-service model, right, because it's new, and how to retain that quality of service and the low risk to the government and the resilience they need, not to mention the transition, right, to that model. So there are hurdles there that I want to make sure that, you know, there are certainly considerations that we need to look at, but I don't see those as objections so much as just that, considerations. And so we want to look at an as-a-service model and figure out, how does it make sense to adopt so that agencies can provide a clear and consistent technical and business value to each of their subscribers. And once they do that, you're starting to get towards that standardized offering, higher efficiency, higher quality of service, improved enterprise governance, consistent user experience. Essentially, you're kind of getting to that elusive, faster, better, cheaper solution, which almost sounds too good to be true, but it's really not. And we're seeing agencies adopt this. So I'm certainly happy to be here and certainly grateful to talk to you more about this, what I think can be a win-win-win solution with the agency, the contractor, as well as the users.
Well, those are some great points, and I appreciate you're really kind of enlightening the idea about that as a service, as a concept, really has evolved. Making acquisitions work for an as-a-service model have also needed to evolve, and there are some important new questions to ask. So thank you for illuminating on that. Next, I'd like to see, can you share an example of a government operation where adopting, let's say, an enterprise IT or a SOC as a service model has really made a difference in terms of cost, agility, or security?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all the government agencies we're talking to, they're earnestly seeking how to evaluate their service delivery models in line with, cost, agility, and security, but also mission, policy, technical constraints, their goals, their end goals, and their capabilities, even their culture. This goes beyond the government to the private sector as well. So looking at where this makes sense is just a constant conversation, right? And where I'm really proud to always highlight is our NASA customer success in migrating to an as-a-service model for their end user services under the Leidos operated NEST contract. So every day, NASA personnel use IT, right, to support their agency's core business, scientific, research, computational activities. Even the Artemis launch, right, is underpinned by IT and network services. And so under our NEST contract, Leidos actually provides, secures, and manages and maintains all pretty much essential IT services for 60,000 plus end users. And above all else, the NEST team aims to continuously improve the end user experience through a centralized service catalog that's constantly being updated, and really underpinned by this culture of yes, right? So it's talking about how do we enable the NASA mission through effective IT services. And the NASA CIO team and our customer has really gotten excited about this concept that we've jointly developed about this culture of yes and tech being a true enabler. So where we can talk about how do we have our teams just purely focus on the hard mission problems. And I think getting people to space and home again counts as a hard mission problem. So you don't want them focusing on why their IT asset isn't working. You don't want them focusing on VPN issues. And so our NEST service catalog has over 500 orderable products and services that our NASA team members can check off and then pull down. And it's just mind-boggling when you think about the breadth and the space of what NASA teams have to do on a day-to-day basis and what they have to cover, and just taking that IT distraction right out of the picture. I mean, during the pandemic, we were actually able to pivot from being primarily in person, just like everyone did, to fully remote with shipments directly to user households and cutting refresh times from 4 hours to 60 minutes. I mean, this is real, concrete, measurable, impactful user service. And so by really fully adopting and going all in on the as a service concept, NASA was able to realize these kinds of benefits. And when our users are completely mission focused, that's when you know these models work.
Well, picking up on that idea, obviously CIOs can see some real advantages to as a service, but thinking about program managers and executives that don't give as much thought to how IT gets done, talk to me a little about how as a service can have a significant effect on agency and employee productivity.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, I mean, I love talking about the technical underpinnings of how to make an as a service work, but I get really excited when I start talking to our customers about this idea of productivity and effectiveness, because this is what it's about. It's about having IT as an enabler. It's the key here is a reduction in noise, a reduction in distractions. And so by codifying and offloading IT, cyber, those management and administrative distractions, I'm not saying cyber and IT are administrative or distractions, but it's capturing that statement of work and those services and being able to carve them out to have them centralized and focused on. Your federal employees are able to focus on mission problems, which honestly is probably why they're at their agency at the first place, right? So another way to look at this is you're reducing distractions, but you're also increasing the amount of data that they now have access to, because you've centralized those functions and you've streamlined them and now they're effective. And so your employees have an increased access to the data that helps them make critical decisions. And I know transparency is a big word that's been floating around more and more these days. So with more data, you want transparency, you want access to that data, but that can be a rabbit hole in and of itself. So I always try to make sure people understand the key is to get the intersection of how to visualize the minimum set of data I need with the maximum set of contextualization, right? So you want all of the data that you need to make a decision, but just the data I need to make a decision at the same time. And this is where things like AI ops and AI ML and analytics can really come in to help provide that contextualization, the analytics to move out of the reactive and overwhelmed space. And then it allows you to really unlock the value of that data for actionable information. So I know I said a lot there, but I think the biggest effects directly for our agency employees is to swap out that idea of being distracted to being mission focused. And the catch is to create data visualization capabilities that are really actionable and not overwhelming. So there's an intersection there to really target.
Absolutely. Well, what across the federal IT landscape stands out to you as, maybe having the most significant potential or a need for modernization in the coming years, where having an as-a-service model would be particularly helpful?
I mean, besides the cost efficiencies that everyone's kind of always hunting towards, I think there's several agency-specific pain points where the as-a-service model can really help, and this gets towards a mindset shift. So as we look at as a service, we talked about it needs to be procured differently. You have to capture your scope of work differently. It causes you to think about your entire organization and enterprise just with a slightly different lens. Well, I would say I would expand that and say not just for an IT service, but things like business processes, right? You're going to centralize it and you want to think outcomes, right? That's what as a service really is all about. How do I centralize and streamline and consolidate things and really focus on the outcomes I'm looking for? And so you can do the same thing with something like business processes. Creating consistent processes means a consistent engagement, means a consistent user experience. It's identification for what can be automated. And so we see all across any industry, any enterprise, there's processes that are siloed and manual and distinct for each operation. Where can we optimize that? Where can we centralize them? Where are there interconnected workflows? Where can we exploit the data in a more digestible way? We talked about transparency and data visualization. All those things feed in once you start to look at things through this as a service mindset. So things like RPA comes to mind, right? So for your automation and looking at how to eliminate manual repetitive work, driving cost avoidance, and looking at what I'm trying to get out of it and shifting that human element. Once again, right? You're shifting the human element towards a higher value work, towards the mission work. So I would say it's not just a contractual model. The as a service model really is about how we focus on, I'm a systems engineer. So I think the inputs, the process, and the outputs, right? And you're really focused on what are the outputs and then what would I need to put in place from a process and a change model perspective to get those outcomes in the same way, but doing it in a different model.
Well, and then lastly, how can partnerships and like working with Leidos help agencies accelerate modernization? And also, what qualifications should leaders really consider when working with an industry partner that's service-oriented versus just product-oriented?
Absolutely. The word partnership really has strong meaning, right? Especially here at Leidos. Our mission is to make the world safer, healthier, and more effective through technology, engineering, and science. And what that means is that we bring technological, engineering, and scientific solutions and services to our customer in a way that enables modernization at their pace and in accordance with their needs and goals. And that's really important. Because, we talked earlier about technical and political and financial and even like policy or mission specific considerations that would drive choices towards as a service. Well, you want your partner to have an intimate understanding of all those same considerations because they understand not just a little bit about you or the scope of work, they understand what it is you're trying to get done, that holistic understanding of your mission and the outcomes you're trying to achieve, and then all those considerations and constraints that maybe are holding you back from achieving those goals that you have. So then together you can look at it jointly. So a strong IT partnership in my mind ensures that a solution appropriately coalesces and considers all of those things that we talked about: financial, regulatory, mission, et cetera. And if you miss any of that, then you run the risk at best of being like a non-optimized service, and at worst it being an unsuccessful partnership. So that's really something you want to obviously avoid. When you talk about what should a partner bring to the table, I think that's really important. And it's not just the scope of work, it's an entire mindset. And it's about a clear path. They should be able to articulate a clear path to navigate to achieve a roadmap of objectives that would include things like operating in a data-driven manner and optimized processes and enhancing your human capital and identifying, where and when to automate and how to visualize and structure your data and enhance your customer experience, and then adapt and evolve to things like security threats and concerns. So you really want that holistic view and someone who's constantly thinking there. And I mean, a good partner can help you not just build and achieve capabilities, but really identify the best route to get there, right? When you're looking at your end goals. And by route, I mean things like your service delivery model, your contractual mechanisms, effective SLAs. So I would encourage agencies to hear from industry providers, hear from other agencies. What does good look like? What is your contract structure? What SLAs really do you find drive meaningful contractual or contractor behaviors, right? So the incentives piece is really important. That doesn't always, make its way to the top of the list, but that's how you drive outcomes, right? So when you're thinking outcome-based, you're thinking incentives, you're thinking, how do I drive good partner behavior? You want to think about all those things, and I would say, talk to those industry and other customer partners, or peers, I should say, in order to craft a meaningful partnership contract, because that'll get you to the right partner. That'll help kind of sift through the potential partners that are out there. And then lastly, I would say, as much as it's all about the capability and the mission, at the same time, if you don't have trust, you don't have a good relationship, right? We're all still humans. And so any good, strong relationship is really founded on complete trust that we're both invested, we're both committed to finding a solution, and we both have a full understanding of the problem. And that trust is what opens the thinking part of our brain, right? The frontal cortex, to allow us to be more creative and innovative and bring our best selves. And Leidos does that really well with the full reach back of the corporation to be able to say, we're here, we have the depth of capabilities, but we're also here because we believe in this agency and this mission. So in summary, I would say, definitely clear roadmap, a strong business case, and underpinned by that trusting relationship gets you to a winning partnership piece.
Some great recommendations. I really appreciate that. And Lexy Guenther, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing some of your insights about some of the real advantages of adopting an as-a-service model and mindset with good partners in the community. So thank you so much for being with us.
Always a pleasure, Wyatt. Thanks.